for another edition of this week's Fantasy Football with Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com, here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Jeff, what's going on, man?
Just getting ready for some games again here, Mike.
That's right, man. And we were just talking about this. Anytime we would see Jets and Browns, it would be the typical Thursday night crap game that we're like, oh, my God, they gave us the two worst teams in the league like they do on Thursday nights. But this one has a little bit of intrigue behind it finally. So, Jeff Pasquino, which guys tonight should be in fantasy football lineups?
I think I'm looking at some running back 2 options here. I'm not so much the quarterback options because Thursday night football tends to be a little bit lower scoring, but I think you've got you got to take a look at Carlos Hyde. You got to take a look at Bilal Powell, and I think Quincy Enunwa is another option as well at the receiver spot. I don't think the wide receivers are quite sorted out for Cleveland, so maybe I go the tight end, but that's about it.
Yeah, keep your eye on Jarvis Landry. Obviously, remember Josh Gordon was traded. More on him coming up. Let's dive into some quarterbacks here for week number 3. Fantasy football. All right, Jeff, Patrick Mahomes, we got to start with him. This guy's been unbelievable, but is he going to come crashing back to earth, or is he going to be a consistent QB1?
Well, everything is pointing towards him being ranked at the top of the list this week, which is kind of strange, kind of odd, but that game's going to be really high scoring, and it's the Chiefs' home opener. And they're 2-0, and Mahomes, they're going to celebrate that game by trying to beat up on San Francisco this week, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets another 3 touchdowns this week.
All right, now another big game from Mahomes, according to Jeff. Let's go to some other plays here. How about Ben Roethlisberger on Monday Night Football? He's going into Tampa, which gave the Eagles all sorts of problems last week.
That's the second of 3 games I'm looking at as being high scoring, the other being the Battle of Los Angeles. But I think we're looking to see a lot of points on Monday night. Pittsburgh's 0-1-1. They're struggling. The Tampa Bay is red hot. It's going to be very much a shootout again on Monday night.
How about his counterpoint, Ryan Fitzpatrick? 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 weeks in a row. But is this the week against Pittsburgh that he comes crashing down? It's a great matchup for him, it seems like.
It is, and Pittsburgh, that's part of the problem, is that they've given up the deep passes and lots of points, and you saw what Kansas City did last week. And Ryan Fitzpatrick is really making a strong case to remain the starting quarterback even when Jameis Winston comes off his suspension. So Fitzpatrick looks poised to have a great schedule spot and push the Tampa Bay towards 3-0.
All right, Jeff, go a couple other quarterbacks throw your way here. What about Deshaun Watson? He had 1 week up, 1 week down. He's got the Giants on tap this week.
The Giants are kind of a recipe for healing all problems from offense. So I think that we're going to see Houston. Now, keep in mind, Houston had 2 receivers get over 100 yards last week. It was a very strange game that Tennessee won that, but Houston is better than that. Both teams are 0-2, but I would argue that Houston's the best 0-2 team in the league, and they're going to get their first win at home this week.
All right, Blake Bortles had a big week last week. Should fantasy owners trust that maybe he is entered into the fantasy fray?
Well, Tennessee's been playing okay on defense, and I can't exactly guarantee that Bortles is going to do solid. Fournette's been banged up, so he's going to try and play again, but keep everybody on speed dial there. Chris Ivory's wrong here. DJ Yeldon is your guy in Jacksonville to back up Fournette, but I think that Jacksonville is kind of wrong with the punches, playing very strong defense, using a mix of guys. Bortles winds up as more of a wide receiver too, although there was a wide receiver I really liked against Tennessee this week.
Jeff, how about Andrew Luck against the Eagles this week? We saw the Eagles give up 2 75-yard touchdowns last week. How has Luck been as a fantasy play?
It seems like Deshaun Watson loves to go deep against his former teams, and that just seems to work out for him. But I think that Luck is going to see a lot of pressure from the Eagles, and I think Carson Wentz is going to be celebrated. It's the first home game for the Eagles on Sunday. You've got the running backs kind of banged up. I don't think we're going to see a shootout. I think Wentz is going to have a solid game. Andrew Luck's going to feel a lot of pressure and be more of a quarterback too this week.
All right, let's go over to some running backs. Don't forget, stick around. Jeff will give you some of his favorite plays, some sleepers, and some waiver wire guys later on in the segment. Ryan is calculating or putting together your questions. Send us your fantasy football questions, 609-403-0973. Send us a text, 609-403-0973. WENJ-FM with your fantasy football questions. Let's get some running back questions in here. James Conner, he's been filling in for Bell. He's got the Monday night game against Tampa Bay. So is Conner a great play on Monday night?
He's a running back one this week. I would not hesitate at all to use him across any lineup.
How about let's go to Saquon Barkley. Great talent, but is he going to get the opportunities behind that offensive line?
It's a tough matchup, but the guy can make his own space, and he's going to get enough touches. When you get 20 to 25 touches a game, and he's got the playmaking ability that he has, he's always a good upside play. He's more of a running back two for me, but that's definitely a start. He's going to see 25 touches this week.
What's the running back situation in San Francisco looking like?
Well, it's really Matt Breida's show right now. He broke off a nice run last week. He topped 100 yards. I think he's going to get the ball a lot this week. It's a tougher matchup against Kansas City, but I think we're going to see a shootout here. I think he's going to get 15 to 20 carries and a few catches, and he'll be a solid running back too this week.
Last week we saw Sony Michel have a great game for not a great game, but it seemed like he had the better of the game for New England against a very good Jacksonville defense. So what are you learning about the Patriots running backs a couple of weeks in?
I'm learning that there's too many mouths to feed. It's really hard to pick one each week, but I think that all of them can go in the running back two with upside category. I wouldn't. If I'm going to have some questions at lineups in general, I'm going to lean towards the teams that are going to score 25 or more points based on Vegas projections. We have several of those this week, including the Patriots.
What about the Baltimore running back situation? Who's the play there?
Well, it's looking like Alex Collins, but Denver's been pretty stout on defense overall, and I think that's going to be a very interesting game in Baltimore. Baltimore's coming off of a longer period of rest, but I think that Alex Collins are going to try and push that team forward and show up pretty well as a solid running back two this week.
Okay, and last running back question for Jeff. What about the Denver running back situation? Last week you told our listeners to go out and get Lindsey. I didn't listen. I waited till this week. Now I have him. So what should they do in Denver? It's not that I didn't listen because I didn't trust. I just didn't have a spot, but now I do.
Well, I'm glad you made a spot for him because he had over 100 yards last week, and his price went up significantly. So he is the guy. He's explosive in that backfield. They're still going to use the other guys to give him some spots and time there, but because he can't carry a full workload. But Denver's offense is looking pretty solid. They've got a balance on offense. They have two receivers who had 100 can go for 100 yards at any given time between Sanders and Thomas. I think you got to go with Lindsey. It's the hot hand in Denver right now.
All right, fantasy expert Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com, answering your fantasy football questions. Keep them coming. Text 609-403-0973 with your fantasy football questions. We got more coming in. We will ask Jeff those coming up in just a minute. But let's go to the wide receiver plays this week and see who Jeff likes. All right, let's start with, how about Keenan Allen? He was a guy that I had him on my team last year. I don't have him this year, but you mentioned that you like a lot of points in that game, but that Rams defense is really good.
They are very good, and that's been the difference. I think that will be the defense. The defense will make the difference this week, but I think that any Charger wide receiver has solid upside. Allen is going to get the most targets, so he's pretty much a guaranteed for 6 or 7 catches, 75 to 95 yards, maybe find the end zone. But it is a tough Rams defense. But if I'm going to pick one wide receiver for the Chargers, it's Keenan Allen.
Keelan Cole, I kept watching that game, and I was playing against him. I said, who is this guy killing me in the PPR?
He's the guy I wanted to mention from Jacksonville this week. And Tennessee has given up 3 wide receivers that have 100 yards against them in just 2 weeks. We have Fuller and Hopkins for the Texans last week, and Kenny Stills out of Miami. So those exactly aren't, except for Hopkins, these guys aren't normally lighting the world on fire. So I think Keelan Cole is a wide receiver, too, that is likely to get 100 yards and a touchdown this week.
All right. You mentioned Fuller. He had the big game last week. He's got the Giants this week. Should Fuller be back in your lineup? Are you taking him out?
I think he's a solid play. The problem will be the game script. If Houston plays solid defense, the Giants struggle on offense like they have, that Houston could be up 17-3 late, and then they won't throw the ball, take the air out of the ball. So Fuller's an okay play, but game script may limit his upside.
A.J. Green, 3 TDs last week. What about A.J. Green? He had a kind of an up-and-down year last year, but do you like A.J. Green in 2018, specifically in Week 3?
Yeah, I think I mentioned him last week because he just owns the Ravens, and he just went off. But I think he's always a solid wide receiver one. Cincinnati is looking very good on offense. Carolina's putting up points, too. So I think A.J. Green's pretty solid wide receiver 1 with a touchdown upside this week.
All right, last one. What are you telling Josh Gordon owners to do this week?
Wait and see. I mean, if you don't have a better wide receiver 3 or a flex option, go ahead and put him out there, because Tom Brady and Bill Belichick loves to take these guys off the street or these castaways and make them look good. So I think that he has a lot of upside for 100 yards and a touchdown against Detroit on a primetime game, and they make him look really good, make New England look even smarter yet again. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he has a big game. But if you want more reliable points and your favorite in your league, you might go a little more conservative. But I don't hesitate too much about playing him.
All right, let's get to your fantasy football questions. Our listeners who keep sending them in for Jeff Pasquino from thefootballguys.com. He's here each and every week to answer your fantasy football questions. We'll fit in a couple of questions each week from our listeners. 609-403-0973. Send us your fantasy football questions for Jeff, and here are some of the questions we picked from the listeners this week.
All right, Jeff, question number 1. Would you trade Jesse James and John Brown for Alex Collins and Amari Cooper?
Anytime you can trade guys that are hot after 2 weeks for guys that are preseason favorites, you should, because you can't. It's a marathon, not a sprint. I would take Collins and the other side of that trade over the hot hands all day long.
All right, PPR League, if Ajayi is out, should the listener go with Corey Clement or stick with Kenyon Drake?
I like Clement. I think Drake is a solid matchup. If get Miami at Oakland, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to say Drake is the matchup with Oakland. But I think definitely pick up Corey Clement. He was going to be a guy I mentioned in a moment.
All right, sit 1, Jeff. Hopkins, OBJ, Tyreek Hill, or Julio Jones. They sat OBJ last week, but what about this week?
I think I'm going to sit Hopkins, because a game script where the Texans may not need to throw as much. The other 3 teams are going to throw and put up points.
Would you go Hyde or James White? They have Kamara in already, but Mixon hurt.
I would go with Hyde just because he's the only guy there, and it's a good matchup tonight. Running backs at home on Thursday night are usually solid plays.
All right, Cooks, Anderson, Fuller, or Golden Tate in half-point PPR league?
Cooks, Anderson. I would go with Cooks. I think that's the offense is too good for the Rams right now. All 3 receivers are solid.
All right, pick 1 for the wide receiver 3 position: Jarvis Landry, Deshaun Jackson, or Robert Woods.
I think if I'm going to PPR league, I think Jarvis Landry. He's going to see a lot of volume. Otherwise, it's Robert Woods. B-Jax is just too up and down.
All right, Breeze or Mahomes?
Mahomes.
That's a tough one.
Mahomes, ride the hot hand. All right, Burton or Kittle at tight end?
I would go with Trey Burton. They're getting the ball in his hands, and Arizona's just terrible.
All right, Matt Breida, Emmanuel Sanders, or Kenny Stills at the flex spot?
I would go with Matt Breida. You usually want to get a running back because of touches in a flex spot.
All right, that's all the time for our questions. A lot of questions coming in, and thanks for all the people who sent your questions in. We didn't get to all of them, of course. We'll try to get more in next week. You can always send them in to Jeff Pasquino from the Football Guys. All right, Jeff, before we go, who are some of the guys you're playing this week?
Okay, running backs that I'm looking at. You got to watch the injuries already. We have possible injuries at Dalvin Cook from Minnesota, so get Latavius Murray. Possibly for Leonard Fournette, so get the T.J. Yeldon. And we mentioned the Philadelphia situation. Also, LaShawn McCoy's banged up, but Buffalo isn't that great. But still, Chris Ivory might be a solid play. Wide receiver, we mentioned any wide receiver. Anytime you can have a decision to pick up anybody in a high-scoring game, do so. I like all the Chargers wide receivers, Mike Williams, Tyrell Williams. I think those guys are a solid pickup. And Chris Godwin's a sleeper play for Tampa Bay.
All right, Jeff Pasquino, footballguys.com. And, of course, you can find Jeff on Twitter at Jeff Pasquino. If you have questions for him getting closer to game time, I'm sure Jeff will personally respond to you. But we appreciate him coming on board the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Jeff, thank you so much, man. Good luck.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the games.